welcome to another call. So today we have a little bit of an interesting twist because we're actually going to get some answers to something I've been looking for. So with us today is Dr. Alan Wellman, and it's through his academic pursuits that led him to earn a doctorate of education and a master of divinity in pastoral care and spiritual counseling. This created a deep understanding in him of the human spirit and of its capacity for growth. So, as a licensed spiritual practitioner through the Centers of Spiritual Living, he has honed his ability to guide individuals through life's most challenging moments with grace and with wisdom. So, again, it's with this background and just his pure appreciation and the sense for it all that he is here to talk with us today about the differences in being an intuitive, a psychic, or a medium. And maybe you can answer which one are you. So, Dr. Alan Wellman, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the call.
Oh, thank you, Angelica. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
No, of course. And I love when we were able to connect because it's number one, meeting different people, number two, the different aspects of it. But can you tell the audience a little bit about how it is that you got here? How is it that you actually got into the spiritual counseling, the pastoral, like all of these things?
Sure, sure. Great question. So I more or less I was raised unchurched. We kind of had this idea of God 1.0,
Yeah.
which is like many of us grew up with the Santa Claus version of God, where, he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're good or bad, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But no real spiritual practices, hardly ever went to church besides Christmas and Easter. We called ourselves the Creaster kids, And I didn't really have a regular church job until I was in high school, maybe junior or senior year, where I actually started singing in my high school choir director's church choir. So that was the first time that I really was introduced to a regular church experience, but it was under the umbrella of being a church musician. So starting 19 years old, I've been a church musician, but I never really resonated with what was being taught or what was being said, or it was just a job, a gig to me as a musician. So when I started my undergrad, I became interested in philosophy and religion, and so I would take classes on ancient spiritual traditions and go to the library and just look out different textbooks and philosophies. And it really wasn't until I grew up in Chicago, and in 2017 I moved to Los Angeles, and so I'm in the Los Angeles area. And it was at that time when I started to realize, oh, I'm actually a little bit more intuitive than I thought. Growing up, I always knew things, or I would have dreams, or things would happen, or I would think about them and then they would happen. And one year I was watching YouTube videos around New Year's and looking ahead for what's the upcoming year for my star sign. And there was one woman that I really took a liking to, her style. And I ordered a reading from her. She said, "Well, you could actually do this work for income. You're a pretty intuitive person." I thought that was interesting because it was confirmation for my youth. And then I did a little search for psychic classes in Los Angeles, and I saw the first thing that popped up was a mediumship class, and I thought, well, that's not exactly psychic. It's talking to the dead people. And so I signed up, and when I clicked register, I realized, oh, this is in 2 days. And not only was it 2 days away, but it was also literally around the corner from my apartment at the time. And so I thought, okay, well, let's see what this is about. So I walk in and I introduce myself to the teacher. I said, "Hi, I'm Alan." And she says, "You're a medium, right? And you should be doing this work." So that kind of started a mentorship with her. And at the same time I was with her, I was developing my mediumship with people like James Van Prague and Gordon Smith. And I'd gone to the Arthur Findlay College several times. And then I started to kind of twist and go more the spiritual counseling route because while I think that it can be important to have that connection with the past generations, I realized right here in front of me there are people who are living and they need help and they need guidance and they need support, and so I started to do what's called clinical pastoral education, which is training to become a chaplain. And so that started my journey into seminary to pursue this Master's of Divinity in Pastoral Care. And as I'm looking down the line and planting those seeds for my future and next steps, I'm feeling very called to hospital chaplaincy and spiritual life coaching. And that's where I am today with that journey. And so I'm a licensed practitioner with Centers for Spiritual Living, and that in and of itself is a very intensive 2-year consciousness training program. So
Mhm.
looking at spiritual law, spiritual principles, counseling skills, and just kind of understanding consciousness in the cosmic sense is where I've really been able to develop and hone those skills.
Right. And I love when you said that yes, we all want to connect to past ones, to loved ones, to past ancestors, but there's so many people now looking for help. And
Exactly.
and that's more about serving. And I think that's where many of us come in because when we look for our past, that's for us, for my life or whatever. But that's more of, okay, how do I help the people? Now it's about giving. Now it's about using this as a gift to be able to provide calm or peace or just a good listening ear without judgment, but coming from a place of such discernment and love and empathy from a
Right.
spiritual consciousness point of view that I think maybe that's what sometimes people just need.
I think you're right. And I would even say that for me, the intuitives, mediumship skill building really was that kind of open door for me to recognize that and understand that there are the living that need the help as well. And so that Charlie Kelly used to always say, Charlie Kelly, he's one of my mentors, he's in England, and he always said that mediumship should be like the window shopping of a store. It just gives you a glimpse of what's inside, but you have to go into the store, i.e., the spiritual development and unfoldment of your own soul, in order to really understand what the display is. So
Right.
just like you could walk down and go see a Macy's window, you can look at it, you can look at what's the display, but until you actually go into the store and you feel the material and you try it on and you smell it and you see how it pairs with the different textures and different styles, until you're just looking at a window. And so it's the window into the spiritual unfoldment of the soul.
I love that. The window. That's a great reference. That's a great visual because it's true. Until we don't try something, it's just like we can listen to the YouTube, we can listen to the podcast, we can listen to all the different books and the people and they're out there. But until we don't apply the knowledge, until we
Exactly.
don't literally live through it through our own skin in this existence, we have no actual idea what they're talking about. It's very
Exactly.
theoretical.
We have to do the work. Ultimately, we can read the books and watch the videos, but unless we do the work, we will never progress because we're just taking someone else's experience
Hmm.
and thinking about it. But that's not going to help us completely. It'll give us an insight and it might change our ideas and our thought processes, but we are the ones that are responsible and have to take the steps to understanding through experience.
Right. And I love that because we're gonna bring that back to today's topic, as in, are you a psychic, intuitive, or medium? Precisely because why? Those sometimes are the steps that we need to take, that we need to understand that maybe we have this intuition, or maybe we have this gut feeling, and maybe we've been asking, okay, am I intuitive? Am I a psychic? And it's not just for the fun of it, it's developing your gift. It's knowing what it is that you have and then allowing that to take you to the next step. Just like with you, You were curious about it. Somebody told you, oh, you could do this. And then you stepped that way. And then when you were there, oh, maybe it's this way. And then, because that's the way I find that we find our purpose. When we follow our gifts and when we serve with our gifts, and we start with the inquiry of, what is this?
Right.
So let's start at the beginning. Question number one, is there a clear difference between intuitive, psychic, and medium?
It's a yes and answer,
Okay.
because they're different gradations. They're different
Okay.
gradations.
Okay.
Just like going back to the department store analogy, the department store itself, the building, and then there are the different departments. You have the
Okay.
men's clothing, women clothing, perfume, home goods, right? And so to get the full experience, you kind of have to first go across the threshold of the door, and then you wander throughout. And so the threshold is that kind of um intuitive nature. I'm convinced everyone has this divine intuition, this gift of inner knowing. That's
Hmm.
what the word intuition means, inner teachings.
Hmm.
So those inner teachings come to us, and at first they're like little breadcrumbs, just like you were describing. We get one little breadcrumb, and we get confirmation, and then we might get another little breadcrumb, and we go get confirmation. um generally generally, and this translates into the development of the psychic and mediumship abilities. Generally, those intuitions come at a very relaxed state of mind, where we're just kind of daydreaming, or maybe we're journaling, or maybe it's in meditation where the brain activity is already very low. So we get those little hits of intuition, and sometimes your mind can be uh going up about one thing, and then whoosh, then the intuition kicks in on something totally unrelated. You might be making dinner one night, and then whoosh, you get something and say, oh, I better look into that. um
Right.
that's very much how that little intuitive nature happens. And I believe that it is the mystics in the past have called it the still small voice of God, that guides us, that leads us, that takes us to the next step. It might be your own inner wisdom stepping forward and say, hey, let's turn left instead of turning right this time, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
So more often than not, those are they more often than not, they are not intentional hits. They're kind of deliberate or passing or fleeting. But once you get it and you hear it, you're like, oh yes, that's what I need to do. And so that's how I would define that intuitive
Okay.
intuition hit. The
Okay.
development of the psychic abilities is a little bit different, because what you are beginning to do after you've been able to understand the energy of your own intuition, you begin to read the etheric energy of other people's energy. Now, this hopefully is not too much of a surprise, but we know through um, through the study of metaphysics, and even quantum physics right now is demonstrating that everything is vibration, everything is energy,
Right.
so we recognize that there is energy that can be read. And so we know this whether we look at a snowflake, which is crystallized energy. We know that from when we take a tuning fork and stick it on a plate of water, and we see the ripples, or there are some really great sound examples of the vibration of that energy. Well, when we are reading psychically, we are reading the etheric, the energy body of someone else, or a situation, or the questions we have.
Okay.
So it really is person to person when we're giving a psychic reading. And so we read the energy. And so that's a very broad term, the energy of the other person. So
Right.
within that energy is all the vibration of job, of romance, of health, of intelligence, all of that is already vibrating there. So when we learn to read the energy of someone else, we begin to understand and recognize, just like when we learn a different language and we begin to recognize, what the word for in English tomato is, when
Right.
we go to other languages and we recognize, oh, that's tomato in Spanish, or that's whatever it is. So we begin to recognize how those vibrations work when it comes to the job, when it comes to the love life, when it comes to the work, etc. And we begin to build up our arsenal, our vocabulary of what those energies feel like. Now that's where
Okay.
our intuition also comes in, because we're using our inner knowing of what it feels like for us, and we're trying to apply it to what it feels like to someone else,
Okay.
if that makes sense. I mean,
Okay, so
it's
let me see if
yeah,
I'm understanding it. So it's okay. The way I explain it is we do have an energy field. We are energy. Not everything is literally condensed inside our body. So outside, we do have our own energy field. And the way that I'm understanding it is within the consciousness of our energy field, there are little, I'm going to use the word pockets of different energy. So there's sections of different energy that you use your own intuition and humanness and knowing of. I already recognize that that's relationship. I recognize that that part is work or money or whatever. Is that how it is?
that's correct.
Okay.
So basically, you're reading the aura, the
Mm-hmm.
etheric energy of the other person, but
Mm-hmm.
you are using your mind to look for those areas of resonance, the
Mm-hmm.
vibrations that resonate in work, and you will vibrate at a similar vibration of the other person. And
Okay.
that word is so ambiguous, the vibration, because it's something that we can't
Right.
necessarily see or feel when we're talking about a life experience. But because we have experience of what it feels like to ourselves, we are
Mm-hmm.
then looking for like situations in the other
Okay.
person.
Okay. And then what about the medium then?
So mediumship it's virtually an identical situation, a virtually identical experience of reading energy. But rather than trying to read the energy of a living person across from you, you are making the grab for the energy of the person who has died and their physical body is no longer alive. But um, there is I'm going to use kind of metaphysical terms here. There is a universal mind where all of this information lies in,
Mm-hmm.
and this is not something that is limited. Some people might call it the Akashic record. Some
Mm-hmm.
people might call it the universal field of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That universal field of consciousness, Akashic records, it is a place where the energy can be accessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a little bit controversial
You
approach
know
to
I want to hear
mediumship, yeah, because
it.
I am I'm at a crossroads with it, because I know that here's where it gets a little slippery. So I know that when people are crossing over, that oftentimes they are greeted by their loved ones, or the loved one's energy appears at the bedside and says, "Oh, grandma's here to take me home," or
Mhm.
"Your dad's here to take me home." So the energy surfaces in the bedroom or the bedside of the dying person. Very, and this is documented. This is very, very
Right.
well documented. I also use my rational mind here and understanding of quantum physics that, energy cannot be destroyed nor created. It's just changed. And
Right.
so I feel like the consciousness energy goes into that universal field of consciousness. And when I go to access the so-called spirit person's voice, it
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily that I am listening to them speak to me, just like you and I are having a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm using my clairs, my clairaudience, my clairsentience, the clair feeling, clear tasting, clear seeing, where I am getting these impressions, but they're flashed into my head. So let's play a little game here. So if I were to ask you, smell freshly baked chocolate chip cookies.
You'll make me hungry.
Most
Mm-hmm.
people most people can do it, right? And if I were to say, can you hear the song Happy Birthday in your head? Most people can do that, right? And we're getting that universal consciousness of that sound. And if I were to say, can you imagine what uh, uh, can you imagine what your grandmother sounded like? If you're lucky and you had a relationship and you can still remember that, or what did your grandmother's house smell like? What did it look like? So
Mm-hmm.
those, they don't go
Mm-hmm.
those, you're not going anywhere physically, but your mind can go there. It
Right.
can go there. And those buildings and people and smells might not exist anymore, but
Right.
they still exist within you in that universal field of consciousness. And so this is where I get a little controversial because like I am not convinced yet that the spirit person is standing by my side telling me these things rather than my reach into the universal field of consciousness is extrapolating those items. And um, the and this is where I was talking about the when you are intuitive and you're distracted and then those hits come into your mind. Well, you can train yourself to um to to reach for certain elements. So you can train yourself to reach for the psychic elements. Where you just kind of get your mind into that same sort of daydreamy state and you can go into the field of consciousness or the aura or the energy field of another person, whether that
Mm-hmm.
person is alive or in spirit.
Right.
And so um that's where like I'm not entirely convinced that the spirit body, the etheric body is there as much as I am accessing these bits of information.
Well, I'm gonna share what is it that you call it? I'm gonna throw the wrench in the thing and have fun with this.
Yeah, let's see.
The way that I see it, and I agree, I don't, okay, lack of a better, let's say Grandpa Bob. So Grandpa Bob has transitioned, has passed away. But then a relative wants to call in or whatever, Grandpa Bob. I also don't believe Grandpa Bob is kind of like that movie Ghost. They're just sitting there kind of waiting and hanging out. I literally don't believe that. I do believe that they transmute, they go into wherever they go into another frequency, they blah, blah, blah. And I do believe that Grandpa Bob's essence of who he was when he was Grandpa Bob is in that collective consciousness that you're calling the Akashic records and all of that. So I do think that is the part of Grandpa Bob that maybe they connect to. But it doesn't necessarily mean, here's my controversial thing to that thinking. If while Grandpa Bob didn't believe in any of this, was an alcoholic, was a wife beater, was it this, was it that, and yet the collective consciousness has him in spirit and has all of that, who's the one that's going to come back? Is it the Grandpa Bob that we knew with all the human conditioning things? Or is it the etherical collective consciousness of who and what he really is speaking through as what was Grandpa Bob? I'm sure I lost a whole bunch of people there, but I think you got
No,
there.
no, I got it. And it's another yes and answer. So,
Right.
like, we know that the essence, well, I don't mind to sound pompous here, but when I say we know, or so I think there is a general agreement with metaphysicians that the essence of our, if you want to call it soul or spirit, is love, is that
Mm-hmm.
universal divinity, all those God qualities of creativity and growth and intelligence and wisdom and love, peace, joy. So that is the part that comes back. But then this is where evidential mediumship comes in. So the evidence that is presented is, I know your Uncle Bob had a problem with drinking, or this Uncle Bob or Grandpa Bob could,
Hmm.
he didn't keep his hands to himself, or whatever it was. The evidence is presented.
Right.
And and it is still it is through the communication of love that
True.
that arrives. And so if we're going into the universal consciousness of love, then, and we're hoping to take that out, there has to be something, because when you think of the word love, that's so ambiguous. Like, we all have an idea of what love is, but we can't touch it. We can't, there's nothing
Right.
tangible. It's a
Right.
feeling, right? It's an experience. So the evidence that is brought forward through the medium would be, oh, I know this man drank. I knew that there would have been an abusive relationship or abusive side to him. So the evidence would demonstrate the physical characteristics, but that is to ensure, and that's where the word evidential mediumship comes from. It's the evidence that says, I have your person, because I could sit here
Okay.
and say, I've got a lovely man, he's beautiful, oh, he brings you such joy and love and peace, and he's so glad you're here today to have this talk with me. Well, that could be anyone, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, I see a lot of that on the platforms. A lot of
Really?
people, very ambiguous, um, things like that, and people will accept it because
They want to hear it.
desperation. Exactly, they want to hear it. It's desperation. Um, so that's where the evidence comes into play to number one, identify the person, and also verify that you are tapping into the consciousness that was Grandpa Bob.
Right. Right. And that's why I find all of this super interesting. Now I have a question for you. What about a channeler?
So
I mean, I know we still have a little bit of time, but what about a channeler? Because I'm thinking the same thing. When we channel, who are we channeling? I
good question.
that might be another episode completely because
This may be incomplete because, like, so in America we call it channeling, all right. In the UK and most of Europe they call it trance mediumship. Now,
oh,
trance mediumship, which again is channeling, here it's without, I don't want to be too judgmental or condemning of channelers, but with in the States, the channeling I've seen have, it's almost always some spirit or some goddess or some um alien or something like that that's coming through, or some star seed, or some nonsense like that. And maybe, I mean, it's
mhm,
universal consciousness.
right.
Anything's possible, I suppose. Where I become skeptical of that is that there's no, you can feel when the spirit world is present. You can feel it. I mean, in it,
Yeah.
they, whether you call it the presence of God or the power, sitting in the power, for instance, is what the mediumship studies are teaching these days, sitting in the power. But you're sitting in the essence of
Hmm.
life. You're sitting in the essence of the divine. You're sitting in the essence of God, what it fill in the blank. So when you have trance, um, trance is in the category known as physical mediumship. Physical
Okay.
mediumship is things like trance and entrancement, where the energy of the other of a spirit communicator entrances and goes over the working medium. There's other physical mediumship events like table tipping or Ouija board or spirit board or pendulums and things like that that are physical mediumship. Now, When it comes to trance, trance is a strange situation because I absolutely it's my favorite type of mediumship because you really do like there is n no denying when it happens to you. And when other forms of physical mediumship, like table tipping, happens, there is no denying that
Right.
something is at play here. Physical mediumship, I feel it. I feel it. And this is what other people have reported to me as well. Like I feel the spirit communicator kind of peel over when they are coming near, and when they are leaving, I feel them peel away. And you feel the personality, you feel the weight, I mean it's very much you feel the physical
Right.
mediumship of trance or
Okay.
and like I was saying, the channelers that I was criticizing, they may feel it too. They may. I don't know. I've never worked that way, but I can only speak from my experience. Um, but when you feel it, you feel when you're in the room with a trance medium, you
Mm-hmm.
feel as a spectator, you
Right.
feel the presence, you feel the power of the spirit world with you, and it's there's no denying it. It's there. That's why like I'm controversial, but like I'm also very convinced of this aspect because this feels so real.
Well,
It's
mostly
very
because it's
strange.
a physical thing you're actually feeling. You're
E-
physically having proof of it.
Exactly, and I think that that's probably why like I'm a little bit more forgiving with trance because it's something that you can actually feel.
Right.
Um, and rather than um, mental mediumship, which is the form of evidential mediumship,
Right.
where like I'm more convinced we're doing that psychically rather than
Mm-hmm.
hearing the
Mm-hmm.
spirit person talk to us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I want to clarify, I'm saying the spirit person talked to us. Some people will receive through sound in their ears, they'll get the clairaudience. So that's the way they perceive.
Right.
More often than not, I'm clairvoyant and I'm clairsentient. So like I get those things and at a fairly higher rate than clairaudience. So I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that.
Okay, cool. So, um, I know we're running a little bit out of time. I did want to bring you on and talk about this because it is something that we always hear around. There are words that are interchanged in this, I don't want to say this industry, this field, but in the whole New Age metaphysics, it's like, are you a psychic? Are you a medium? Obviously, being Hispanic, it's like, do you read cards? Like, are you a tarotist? Or are you this? Are you that? There's so many labels.
Yeah.
But I personally, that's why I said in the intro, I wanted to know this because it got to a point that even I was confused because I think I'm a little bit of everything, and I think
Yeah,
everybody is to a
absolutely.
certain degree. I have never gone on to develop it. Whatever I have has developed on its own. That
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Like, okay. But it is very intriguing to know, like, the intuition, the psychic, and the medium. And when you said medium, it's the exact same thing, except for the ones who have passed, it actually made sense to me. So thank you.
Mhm.
Because there was always that, it sounds so similar. Are they just interchanging a different word for the same thing? But no, it is the same process-ish.
Same thing, it's to use the cards, for instance, that is a skill set. You have to
Right.
develop the skill how to read. I mean, your mind is still in the relaxed brain state that psychic and mediumship happens in. Um, but
Is it
there's
a theta state or is it what brain
so
state?
there's alpha and then theta is
Uh-huh.
start of it. So alpha is our regular, then theta, and then we get down to delta, which is where sleep happens. And so just above the delta, very low theta is
Right.
where trance happens. And
Okay.
usually 7 to 14 hertz, which is the brave waves, is
Mm-hmm.
theta, and that's where mediumship, psychic inspiration happens. So there is one other thing you asked about, and that was called inspired talking or inspired writing and things like that.
Uh-huh.
That also happens in high theta, high theta, where your mind is just starting to kind of glaze over in your head and your thoughts are kind of wilty. And so we start speaking and we just, this divine wisdom just flows through us.
Right.
And so that is that same state as that
Right.
same state. So to go back to the skill building, like when I moved to LA, 8 years ago, I wasn't developed. I didn't have any experience, but I learned how to do it. And I learned because I put a lot of hours and I jumped full force. And so one of the things I have a Udemy course where I teach basically everything that I've learned and developed through teachers or on my own. And I put it in that course so that anyone who's interested to at least get the theory and some practical exercises
Okay.
that they could access it. And it's very just like this conversation, very down to earth and matter of fact
And controversial. Don't
and
forget controversial.
controversial.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned it because we are wrapping up and I do want people to follow you. I do want people to meet with you and connect with you. So we'll go ahead and put the Udemy link in the notes and in the description. And definitely thank you. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for the controversial conversation, which I love because we can definitely go down a whole rabbit hole because there's so many different things that can and can't be. And to be honest, I am so open about all of them that I don't know if I have the absolute truth because I know I don't. And the truth is
Right.
always changing because we're all different. And I have met, and especially on the talk show, I've met several people that don't even need to develop the skill. It's like they had it from a past life and it woke up and one day they just grabbed cards and knew how to do it, or they did this and they, which everybody is different. But what I love about you is you got the inkling, somebody told you, you went for it and you developed it, and now you're helping other people. So regardless of however we get there or whatever we understand, I think it's a beautiful thing that if we have this, whether we are born with it and grow up in it or study it or both, that we can all help each other. And I think that's the most beautiful part to it all. Whether it's Grandpa Bob or it's the goddess, it doesn't matter as long
Right.
as the messages do come from love and from truth. And that's the goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Wellman, for your time and for being with us today.
My pleasure. Talk soon.
Yes, bye everyone.